BoJack Horseman, Indian food disguised as a hot dog. All right, so I'm talking about BoJack Horseman today, the animated comedy drama television show. It aired, or I guess I shouldn't say it aired. It release date, I don't know. It aired from 2014 to 2020. No, aired isn't the right way to say that. I'm caught up in like old school TV language, and it's like that's not how it works now. It's streaming. Um, they released they released 6 seasons, 77 episodes total between 2014 and 2020. There we go. Created by Raphael Bob Wasberg. I probably didn't say that right. We have voice acting by Will Arnett, Amy Sedaris, Alison Brie, Paul F. Tom, Aaron Paul, a lot of other folks in there too that I just can't list all of them. That would take forever. But it is, I will tell you right now, a fantastic television show that I was skeptical about from the beginning. So it's real, raw, self-aware. It's fun, serious, abrasive, reflective, jarring, and nuanced. Emotionally funny isn't really what comes to mind. I mentioned that it's fun, but like I wouldn't say it's funny in a way when you think of like, oh, this is an animated show or this is a comedy or whatever. It's very a reflective practice. I definitely felt confused at times in a good way. Usually confusion is not a good thing when you're consuming media, but I definitely felt confused in a good way at times. But very reflective, and again, it wasn't that I was like, oh, this is really funny. It wasn't that, although there are definitely a lot of moments of levity to keep you buoyant and not drowning in the reality of life. Um, Man, I should have used that as like my introduction instead of the Indian food disguised as a hot dog thing. I'll explain that stuff in a minute. So basically, if you don't know what BoJack Horseman is about, and I'm going to try to sell you on this because I was very skeptical. I generally just like don't watch animated stuff, even if it's like, oh, it's for adults. I've just never thought of it as like, okay, it might be for adults or something, but like it's not for me. There's a few anime that I've seen a couple of times in movie format that I'm like, okay, Akira's like, that's for me. It's that kind of stuff. It's way more serious, sci-fi esque, and like dystopian things like that. But I haven't seen anything really like. I mean, I used to watch Simpsons. I used to watch Family Guy. BoJack Horseman, I thought would be more in that kind of vein. I guess I watched South Park for a little bit when I was like 12 or 11. And I'm not really interested in that. And BoJack Horseman, I thought was going to be kind of more of the same of that, just kind of like ridiculous, just pushing the limits. And I'm not saying it's not important, but it just wasn't where my interest was. So basically, to summarize what BoJack Horseman is, and then I'll kind of get into more details. There's no real spoilers here to tell you. But it's kind of like a sitcom where people are in ridiculous situations that they have to get out of. It's that kind of thing, situational comedy, right? However, the show illustrates a lot of nuance, which I've mentioned, and that's the third time I mentioned it because it's that important, and I'll get into the specifics in a bit. Because really what it does is talk about how they got into those situations, and they treat it with grace and empathy, and a fuller picture is what they provide. Basically, BoJack Horseman, the main character, he's a washed-up family sitcom actor, star, and he has substance abuse problems, and he's just facing his demons. And that's pretty much it. That's what BoJack Horseman is about. But it is, again, very real, very raw. I feel like I shouldn't combine those two. It's so cliche. It doesn't pull punches. It gets in your face. That's what I mean by raw. the show, the way that it's written and how they depict things, it's not like it gets in your face in like some really gory way or graphic, like not like that, but in the concepts and the things that they're talking about. Again, we've got someone who has money, fame, attention, whatever, or had, and there's all these nuanced parts about like being an artist and being like a real comedian or an actor or a star or a celebrity and all this stuff. But this person is like desperately alone, and they're trying to figure that out. I say person. That's the other thing. I mean, like we've got this world, this universe where we've got animals, anthropomorphic animals that are basically humans, just with animal heads. We've got actual humans portrayed as well, and they all just intermingle and whatever cross species, children and everything else, and like it's just not a thing that's worth discussing for them in the show to explain how it works because it doesn't matter. So with a lot of animated stuff, you suspend your disbelief, you leave it at the door, and whatever, because that's not what this is about. So I mentioned it being really self-aware, and I think that they poke fun at themselves from time to time, and it's really smart. I should have put that in the adjectives too. I mentioned that it's jarring because sometimes you're laughing, and the next second you are like witnessing someone's really depressed mental state or a tragedy that occurs, and you are in grief and sadness and pain. And so it just like, but it does that like life does. It is one of the most real things that I've seen, and it's animated, right? And I think that maybe that gave them the freedom to do that. I don't know. I feel like it shouldn't matter. I feel like you could have, why can't I think of, you could have live action and you should still be able to tell that same story in the same manner. But I know this gave them some freedoms to do some ridiculous stuff, and that was more of the fun part. But I mentioned it being abrasive too, and that just goes with like that realness. That when things happen, they happen. They don't give you a warning. It's just like, this is life. This is what happens. There's no working around it, right? I guess, and that kind of stuff is what causes the reflective nature. I mentioned the nuance thing. Let me go back to that, I guess. Because, again, going to the intro thing of like Indian food disguised as a hot dog, it's just that like a hot dog seems really plain, really simple. You know what you're gonna get. You choose your toppings or whatever. You see them right on there. It's very plain. It doesn't have a very complex flavor profile, but Indian food generally does. So like yeah, you've got some sauce and you've got a protein and maybe some rice or whatever. But like in that sauce, you've got so much spice. You've got these things that are again complex flavors and very nuanced and just like layered. So that was kind of where I was going with that. But now I like the other one better, but I'm not going to re-record it. That thing about just like the show is what keeps you buoyant instead of drowning in the misery of life. But it presents the misery of life to you. You are in the water, no matter what. You are in the water. That is just, you are living, so you are there, no matter what your situation is. Man, it's so good. It's just really great, and I think I need to watch it again. Now that I'm talking about it, like, I should watch it again at some point. And I rarely watch things, like, I like watching movies multiple times, but shows take me so long to get through, so. Anyway, target audience. I think that if you are mature, I won't say necessarily an adult. I think that as a teen, you could watch this and it could really help you learn about life and give you things to reflect on as you are maturing. But I would say that it'll get lost if you're not mature enough to handle it. There's that zone of proximal development, right? It is challenging as well. And so if you are a person who wants to be challenged, who wants something that is going to bring you to a self-reflective practice, I mean, it's palatable. It's a palatable challenge. Again, it's not so jarring that I didn't need to take a break from it or anything like that. But yeah, if you are interested in that type of show, I guess, to me, the animated stuff has nothing to do with anything. Like, it's just, I guess that's what can help make it a little more palatable, is that there's enough, again, you have your suspension of disbelief, you leave it at the door, it doesn't matter, it doesn't play a role in the storytelling except for the fact that it might make it more palatable because you can relate to the content even though you don't relate to this man with a horse head named BoJack Horseman as just a being, as a physical presence, you're like, well, I don't have a horse head, and I'm not interested in a cat, or whatever, right? Um, so the universe creates enough distance, I think, in the way it's set up and structured and written, that you have enough distance in order to absorb this amount of pain and information and realness in a way that lets you reflect and think and ponder and do something with that information. Um, what is the function or its importance? I think it provides nuance to life. It gives this background of like, hey, how did we get into this situation? Why are we an alcoholic? Why are we depressed? Why do we feel these things? Um, and it gives an opportunity for empathy in a way, because you see this fuller picture rather than just like the distance you would get, of like, oh man, this celebrity's like super obnoxious and abusive, or they're just like really attention seeking and they're into drugs and whatever, and you don't see anything else. And it's, I don't know. Again, there's enough distance there too, with using a character that is like this washed up celebrity, whatever, and they're middle aged and they're struggling. There's enough distance there from my life or from the majority of people watching, that I think that helps as well. But um, the other thing I think this does really well, and what makes it an important show, is that it turned me, like it made me open up a bit to other shows that could be like this, that are animated. Because for me, that was always just such a turn off. I'm like, oh, it's animated, it's probably for kids. Or it's an adult show, but it's not because of the depth of it. It's an adult show because of explicit content. And I'm like, that doesn't interest me. If it's like, oh, you're a cartoon, but you're really ultra violent, or there's sexual themes, or I don't care. It doesn't. That's not novel. That's not of interest. It's either it's got depth and layers and it's real, or it's not. It doesn't matter if it's live action or it's a cartoon. I'm not all of a sudden interested because you're edgy and you're making an animated show, and animation is for kids, but we're making it for adults by having hookers and whatever, sex workers and violence and guns, and it doesn't. I don't know. That's why GTA doesn't interest me, right? Like, that's just like, okay, cool. Is it about the storytelling? Is it about what's real and what will actually challenge me or not? And so I think that's what's so important about this, is that amount. I'm going to use the word nuance again. The depth, the layers, the nuance, the everything, and the realness of life that comes through. That is what makes it adult or mature. Is the actual depth that this has, not explicit content. Top shelf, top shelf show, 100% top shelf. Like, I'm surprised at how much I like it and still like it and love it. To sum it up, I don't remember what episode this was. It might have been the very last episode. I can't recall, or it was close to it. But there's just one line, and it was, "Life's a bitch, and then you keep living it." And I think that just like BoJack Horseman.